and loving parent. Just a small aside is that listening to Peter Keppel and Mr. Aber, Dr. Abers this morning, I was struck by various of you among you calling for understanding the social reasons for this increase in alienation. And, you know, I was brought up to believe that children need guidance and moral roadmaps. And there was a gentleman who spoke about that, a psychoanalyst today, the roadmap of morality. And morality, what we're doing today is seeing that we have a judicial system that wants to help, but is so constrained because it goes against the grain of what we need to do to bring up children who are healthy, morally healthy. So as I got my two younger children back after 2 years, and I had nowhere to go. I could not bring my children home because they were out of control. And like most alienated parents, I had lost all parental authority over my children. So instead of doing what had been done before with a therapist, this is so terrible, they won't eat, Caroline, after my own heart, said, well, okay, children get hungry and they'll eat eventually. So she said, okay, you don't feel like eating, well, the cookie jar is on top of the refrigerator and the milk is in the fridge. So the children used to sneak out downstairs when they thought nobody was around, and eat their cookies and milk. So what? They lived on cookies and milk for 3 days. It didn't kill them. My instinctive response, being I was brought up with British parents, you know, strict discipline and, you know, you behave yourself. It was my response to say, you naughty children, how dare you do this? But something held me back. And by the way, we all have to understand that when you lose parental authority over your children, all the rule books go out the window. It is completely, the rules of discipline for alienated children, if you are a parent or a therapist or a professional, you cannot expect these children to behave as normal children when it comes to authority. They have lost the sense of discipline and authority. So what did I do? I covered my head and I crouched down and I let them hit me. I said, well, it can't be that bad. And I let them keep on hitting me. And it didn't hurt that much, and a few bruises, but it was nothing terribly bad. And they were hitting me very hard and calling me every name under the sun, bitch, rat, you know, horrible words. And gradually, I could feel their energy. I mean, how long can you go on hitting somebody when you're 7 and it's midnight, you know? Let's be practical here. So they gradually got tired. So they lay down on their beds, each of them, one on each side, and started to just call me names. Bitch, rat, and spit, you know, kashe, spit. And then they went to sleep. They fell asleep. And that was a moment of breakthrough. And the following night, my boy, Jonathan, took a bath. And it was most interesting. He took a big bath, and he wanted the bath full of water. And this is so sort of psychoanalytic, I guess. I'm a teacher, I'm not a psychologist. He pretended that he needed something, because he wouldn't let me go in the room with him, of course. He pretended that he needed soap. Well, I knew he didn't need soap, so I brought him a new lump of soap. And then he would go under the water, and he would say, I'm a hippopotamus. And he had a psychological profile of people who do not change. These people do not change. And their hatred of the parent remains as strong 12, 15, 20 years later. And to expect them to change is, I would say, highly optimistic and very rare. Just to finish telling you about my own situation, the older children, what of them? Well, my older daughter, Deborah, is now finishing her baccalaureate in the University of Montreal as an honors English student. And in 1999, she came back to me of her own accord at the age of 21. The last time I held her in my arms, she was this little child of 11. And she came back to me as this beautiful stranger in 1999. Well, there were certain things that were critically important. First of all, the fact that the siblings, the younger children, had been with me served as a bridge to the older children. And I have had many cases, you don't know about me very much, but since 1991, I've been involved in hundreds of attempted reintegrations and reintegrations. And separating the siblings is not necessarily a bad thing. Boys were on the floor playing Monopoly with one of our volunteers. And the mother started to cry as she was folding the clothes. And little Brian, who was 8, was looking at me because he was still afraid to talk to me, really. I mean, to his mother directly. And he said, Pamela, and I said, what? And he said, why is Mom crying? Now, I didn't try to explain to him why Mom was crying. That's not my job. My job is to facilitate the relationship with the parents. So I took him by the hand, walked him over to Mom, and I said, you ask Mom why she's crying. He asked her, and he said, Mom, he didn't call her Mom still. There was no name. It went from rat to no name, and we were at the no name stage. The following day he called her Mom. He said, why are you crying? And she said, I'm crying because I've waited for 6 years to fold your clothes. He was a bit puzzled by that. He was only 7, 8. So he went back to play Monopoly. And after another few minutes, he came and he said, Pamela, let me figure this out here. If my mother is crying because she couldn't fold my clothes for 6 years, does that mean she loves me?
One of those protocols says that the parent who comes to us with the child must have some form of custody. Now, often it works out that there is a joint custody arrangement of some sort. Sometimes it happens that the court demands that this child be given the opportunity to come to know this parent. And the presence of a court order to us is sufficient.
All right, I'm not going to go through more details on how this works, but let me give you a couple of very specific examples. One we talked about last night. This is the kind of nonsense that I see in almost every family law case that I get to look at in some detail. Many of the mental health experts will use psychological tests that in the United States are considered ethics violations, because there we have rules that you cannot use so-called psychological tests unless there's evidence that the test is really testing something. That seems fair, doesn't it? If not, it's consumer fraud. You're selling a product that doesn't work. You're selling a car that doesn't have an engine. You're selling something you call a psychological test, which in fact doesn't measure the things you claim it measures. I'll give you two extreme examples. One is called the draw person test or the draw family test. This is utter nonsense. If people try to use that in family law, you can try to get their license revoked. You can certainly bring in your boxes of research and show the judge that decades of studies have shown that these kinds of procedures aren't useful. They're extremely helpful, extremely useful. Then you need to make sure that lawyers are being trained at legal conferences in these kinds of problems and these kinds of methods. You need to make sure that judges are being trained in judges' conferences. You need to make sure that there are articles being written in the journals that lawyers read, in the journals that judges read. And once again, very important to get scientists interested in this so they're writing grants and doing research and publishing their data in the major basic science journals. Most all of the early false memory syndrome work was published in psychotherapy journals, which the science people at the university, we refer to those journals as chit-chat journals. Okay, they don't carry a lot of weight in the science world. Similarly, the PAS controversy is being played out in the Journal of Family Therapy or Child Malnutrition. These are not basic science journals. These are not the journals that the university people will turn to. These are not the journals that will turn the heads of the judges. Basic journals in child psychology, in social psychology, those are the kinds of journals where this research should start to show up. My time is almost up, and I did want to leave some time for questions.
Können ihnen überhaupt gar nicht die Möglichkeit geben, ihre Koffer auszupacken und ihre wissenschaftlichen Argumente, Gegenargumente auf den Tisch zu legen. Er wird ihnen das Wort abschneiden, ohne dass das eine rechtliche Gehörverletzung darstellen würde. Sie können ihn also auch gar nicht ablehnen, denn er ist ja so überlastet. Ich weiß und teile mit Ihnen die Meinung, dass der Zeitfaktor, das sogenannte kindliche Zeitgefühl, selbstverständlich dabei zugrunde geht, weil es von einem überlasteten Familienrichter nicht beachtet werden kann. Er kann es gar nicht. Fragen Sie bitte die anwesenden Familienrichter. So, und wir in Deutschland sind angeblich das reichste Land in der Europäischen Union. Wie soll das dann in Europa funktionieren? Ich habe keine Hoffnung, dass das besser wird. Und das Dritte, Sie haben auch über Political Correctness gesprochen. Es ist mit Sicherheit political incorrect, hieran irgendetwas zu ändern, denn es müsste dazu führen, dass wir wesentlich mehr Familienrichter bekommen, dass wesentlich besser wissenschaftlich gearbeitet werden darf, auch im Courtroom. Das wird aber nicht geschehen. Das geht nicht. Das ist das eigentliche Problem. Und deshalb habe ich die Befürchtung, dass so sehr ich alle Theorie des PAS teile und es bis nach Straßburg gebracht habe, ich habe die Befürchtung, dass das in Deutschland ganz einfach scheitern wird. Und deswegen habe ich größte Sorge, danke mich aber ganz besonders für die Anregungen, die Sie mir und meinen Kollegen hier in diesem Saal gegeben haben. Danke.
Mentioned that those are all the same kinds of concerns that I heard with the FMS problem. Exactly the same. The judges won't listen to all these experts, they're too busy, there's not enough money, there's not enough time, it can't be done. I mean, when we started suing the psychotherapists, it had never been done. It was literally considered impossible by the national legal experts, and 70 cases later, they were all out of business. So it does involve.
Kann man auf der Webseite www.nkmr.org.se lesen. Das ist die Nordische Komitee für Menschenrechte. Und die Juristen, sie wusste bei, sie hatte die Fälle von Olson, sie hat 7-mal in Straßburg gewonnen, aber leider hat nichts sich verbessert. Die Olson-Kinder sind zum Beispiel noch nicht mit den Eltern zusammen. And now I turn over to English. I'm very thankful to have been invited, and I'm sorry that I will not have many encouraging things to say, but rather I'll illustrate the junk science going on, also with the cases, the very sad cases from Norway and Sweden that I will tell you about. And I hope you will be patient to hear, although I don't give any solutions. To our knowledge of how to identify ongoing alienating processes, so that we, as professional psychologists, psychiatrists, physicians, social workers, lawyers, solicitors, judges, do not contribute to perpetrating alienation that can result in PAS. So far in the Swedish and the Norwegian courts, where I have tried to introduce PAS in my written reports and when given witness in court, PAS has not been accepted, as said Dr. Gardner. There has not been an understanding of the fact that a parent can influence the child to turn against the other parent, and that if this influence has gone far, the child needs help to come out of that harming influence. It has not yet been accepted that public authority figures, just like parents, can act to alienate a child from one or both parents and thereby harming the child.
Zum anderen und umgekehrt. Die Person, die man verlässt, ist nicht sicher eine Person, die man auch behalten kann, deshalb kann man sie auch nicht verlassen, deshalb wird der andere, der hereinplatzt, augenblicklich zum Feind. Natürlich haben diese Kinder dieselben Verlustängste, wenn sie von der Mutter zum Vater wechseln, wie wenn sie zurück vom Vater zur Mutter wechseln, zumindest in den allermeisten Fällen. Es gibt ja noch, bei kleineren Kindern ist es meiner Erfahrung nach einer der Hauptgründe, warum sie nach Besuchstagen ganz durcheinander sind, auch regelmäßig krank werden, spinnen, aggressiv sind, den Müttern auf die Nerven gehen und ähnliches mehr. Und Sie wissen aus Ihrer Praxis, das wiederum sind die allerhäufigsten Anlässe, warum Besuchskontakte eingeschränkt werden. Nicht? Das kennen wir, dort beginnt also dieser Teufelskreis. Eine andere Untergruppe sind jene Kinder, die ihre inneren Beziehungen noch nicht hinreichend trianguliert haben. Mit Triangulierung meinen wir in der Psychoanalyse ein bisschen was anderes als in der systemischen Familientheorie, Therapie. Unter Triangulierung meinen wir, dass wir über ein inneres Beziehung...
Ja, ich möchte als Analytiker noch eine gruppendynamische Anmerkung machen, die vielleicht von Professor Gardner gestern schon gemacht worden ist in dem Workshop. Aber da war ich jetzt leider nicht dabei. Und die ergibt sich eigentlich zwangsläufig aus dem, was Sie bereits erzählt haben, was auch gestern schon aufgetaucht ist, nämlich dieser Spaltungsmechanismus. Ob man den nun dem Borderline-Syndrom zuordnet oder narzisstischen Störungen oder so, ist da gar nicht so wichtig, sondern mir geht es um den Mechanismus. Und der wirkt sich auch aus in der Gruppe, mit der ein Spaltender zu tun hat, sowohl jetzt in Bezug auf das Kind, da wäre die interessante Frage, wie weit da ein spaltender Elternteil auch ein Kind geriert, das in einer Art Modelllernen dann auch wiederum spaltet. Die zweite Sache ist aber auch die, dass natürlich in der Umgebung, zum Beispiel Jugendamt, Sozialarbeiter, Richter, dort eine Spaltung induziert wird, sodass es im Außen zu Kämpfen kommt.
Haben Sie eine Frage oder ist es ein Statement?
Das ist ein Statement und das Statement ist gerade zu Ende.
Ah ja, okay, danke.
Also ich wiederhole nochmal, wie weit wiederholt sich ein Phänomen, was aus der Gruppentherapie sehr gut bekannt ist, nämlich die Spaltung im Außen. Auch sogar im Gesellschaftlichen, wie wir auf dieses Syndrom reagieren.
I think all the things that you mentioned are very valid and true, and thankfully I'm one of the ones who made it intact as an adult, and there's a lot of others out there who haven't been as successful. So I want to commend you for everything you said. I also just want to point one thing out, and that is that abducted or alienated children feel very much that their lives and their destinies have been taken out of their control, that their loyalties, their love, and there's a very fine line that PAS parents need to be very careful that they kind of don't do the same thing in a sense in this fight for loyalty and fight for who the kid loves and what the kid thinks and all of that type of thing. And that's just something I want to point out, to be very careful not to make this a science and exactly how and what and when to say what, when, where, to make the kid in a certain amount of therapy hours or a certain amount of time think or feel or act in a certain way. So just wanted to point that out.
Und es sind immer beliebige Gründe, um weiter Umgang zu verhindern. Aber der eigentliche Hintergrund ist ja dann auch ein Gutachten mit ganz klar Persönlichkeitsstörungen der Eltern zu beauftragen. Sehen Sie sich als Partei in der Lage, da vielleicht auch herangezogen zu werden, wenn das Gericht Sie anspricht?
Da kann ich eine ganz klare Antwort darauf geben. Ich bin Kinder- und Jugendpsychiater. Unser Klientel 4 bis 18 Jahre. Für Erwachsene sind wir nicht zuständig und ich würde mich dann nicht für zuständig erklären wollen. Und im Übrigen denke ich nicht, dass es so eindimensional als...
Also ich spreche aus meiner ganz persönlichen Erfahrung. Dieses familiäre Insiderwissen liegt bei mir leider Gottes überwiegend brach. Mancher Kinderkollege, reiner Kinderkollege oder kinderpsychiatrische Kollege ist froh für dieses familiäre Insiderwissen. Genauso wie ich auch einen Richter als Ansprechpartner sehr gerne akzeptieren würde. Oder auch so weiter. Danke.
Psychologisch oder psychiatrisch untersuchen zu lassen. Dass die Richter aber diese Grundlage brauchen. Ich denke, genauso dringend brauchen die Richter die Möglichkeit, therapeutische und beraterische Interventionen per Beschluss anzuordnen. Also da steht eine Gesetzesänderung ins Haus.
Sozialarbeiter am Jugendamt. Mir ist was aufgefallen, was am Schluss ein bisschen salopp so kam, die Stellung des Jugendamtes dazu und das dagegen arbeitet. Ich denke, in der Praxis hat man sich das so vorzustellen. Ich bin für eine Fülle von Aufgaben verantwortlich. Darunter ist die Familiengerichtshilfe nur eine. Ich mache Jugendhilfe, ich mache Heimunterbringung, ich mache alles Mögliche. Ich habe zig Scheidungen im Jahr zu betreuen, wo minderjährige Kinder betroffen sind. Eins meiner Aufgabengebiete. Das Problem